I'm here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Alexander, let's talk about the trade war, the tariff war between the United States and China. On May 5th, things got nasty. Trump sent out a couple of tweets after it appears the tariff and trade talks have broken down, essentially, and Trump sent out these tweets. Let me read them to you. And I quote, "For 10 months, China has been paying tariffs to the U.S. of 25% on $50 billion of high tech and 10% on $200 billion of other goods. These payments are partially responsible for our great economic results. The 10% will go up to 25% on Friday. $325 billion of additional goods sent to us by China remain untaxed, but will be shortly at a rate of 25%. The tariffs paid to the U.S. have had little impact on product cost, mostly borne by China. The trade deal with China continues, but too slowly as they attempt to renegotiate. No." Alexander, what do you make of Trump's comments here?
Right. A number of things. Firstly, I have to take issue with his view that this has had any major effect on the US economy. My own personal view about this, and obviously many people will take different views. My own personal view is that the major reason that the US economy has been growing strongly since he became president is because his very important tax changes, which he carried out shortly after he became president, and because of the loosening of monetary policy, which we have seen over the last few months. So I think those are the major reasons. But it is quite clear to me that Donald Trump no longer expects any major breakthrough to happen with China in the trade talks, and he is moving steadily towards a position of taking unilateral action. And I think that's probably what we're now going to see. I think that the very wide expectations that have been that there would be some sort of a deal eventually done are going to prove wrong. And I think what we're going to see is apparently there's going to be more talks soon, but there will, before very long, be a general agreement that there's been a breakdown, that there won't be a deal, and we will see the United States to move towards unilateral tariffs.
What does this mean, Alexander? Who comes out winning? Who comes out losing? Is the U.S. prepared for this? Is China prepared for this? Is this a lose-lose all the way around?
I don't think it's a lose-lose. And I think people are actually over-dramatizing this thing. I think both the United States and China are now very big economies, and I think they can each absorb this. I mean, one point where Trump is absolutely right is that these tariffs have had no appreciable effect on the rate of inflation in the United States. People have got this wrong about the United States. The United States does run trade deficits with most of the world, but in reality, it produces most of what it consumes. It is a self-sufficient continental economy. As for China, it is not a self-sufficient economy in the same way that the United States is, which is why it has focused so much on exports. But its One Belt, One Road program, its Belt and Road program, is intended to correct that, and it is doing so. I mean, China has now made very important deals, especially with the Russians, who are fully capable of providing China with all the raw materials and resources that China needs, including the agricultural resources, by the way, many of which it used to import from the United States. So it too, I think, can absorb all of this. What we're seeing, I think, has a greater geopolitical importance in the sense that China and the US are now clearly decoupling from each other and are starting to form blocs which are to a great extent directed against each other, then I think it will have any immediate economic effect on either of these two economies.
So you think any market reaction, any negative market reaction to what's taking place is temporary, and you think that the Trump economy is going to continue to march on up to
Absolutely.
2020?
Yes, I absolutely do. I think people have overestimated this thing. I think a lot of the Democrats who don't like Trump for many reasons, but I mean, they weighed in on his trade policy. And I think that they will continue to do so. And they've been predicting all sorts of disastrous consequences as a result of what he's doing, which of course have failed to happen, and they will continue to. I think in time, because this expansion is so heavily credit-based in the United States, it will run its course, and it will probably create many more problems along the way. I mean, the US already is running a budget deficit of around 4% of GDP, and it is now its total, its aggregate sovereign debt is somewhere around the same as its GDP. These are bad figures, and they're getting worse. So, at some point, this thing will run its course, but I don't see it doing so before 2020. And in the meantime, lots of jobs are being created. Wages in the United States are ticking up for the first time, really, since the 2008 financial crisis. And people are feeling better. And as a result, Donald Trump's ratings are rising. And I think that's what's going to continue. I don't think the breakdown in the trade talks is going to impact on the economy. And I think from Donald Trump's political point of view, it will be his way of showing to the people of the industrial belt of the United States that when he says that he will set out to protect their industries and their jobs, that is exactly what he will mean to do.
Can one make the assumption or the statement, Alexander, that this was inevitable? In other words, China's rise, the U.S.'s resurgence after 8 years of Obama, and now you have Trump, a strong leader in the U.S. You had China steadily rising to the point where it is the number two, maybe by some accounts the number one player, but definitely a strong number two. Could you say that this was inevitable, that they would start moving away from being partners and moving towards being adversaries? Because, okay, you said that this is more of a geopolitical issue. It seems to me that we're looking at number one and number two finally getting into the ring and boxing it out, duking it out. I mean, this was bound to happen, was it not?
Well, right. Can I just say something? It was bound to happen, given the kind of political system that the United States has, where it finds it very, very difficult to accept equality on the part of other countries. It didn't need to make an adversary of China. I think at some point, an adjustment of the trade position between these two powers was inevitable because, of course, the Chinese leveraged very cleverly the trade concessions the United States made to them back in the 1970s and 1980s in order to win them over in the Cold War conflict with the Soviet Union. The Chinese leveraged those to kickstart their economy. And of course, on the back of that, they built their mighty export and industrial machine. And so inevitably, there was going to come a point where the United States was going to say, well, you've taken advantage of us.
They took it too far. Can you say that they took it too far?
Well, I don't think that they took it too far because, that implies some degree of willfulness on the part of the Chinese. But there was going to come a point where the United States was going to say enough's enough.
I'll say willfulness on the part of the U.S. by letting them take it too far.
Absolutely. The U.S.,
the Obama administration, the Clinton administration, I would say they let them exploit them.
If one wants to put it that way, that's a much more valid criticism because the U.S., the Obama administration, certainly, even to some extent the George Bush administration before that, they allowed the Chinese to press on with this vast export expansion into the US long after the geopolitical reasons for it had gone. Of course, the point was that it suited the interests of an awful lot of people in the US, many of whom were, of course, in the business community and were major donors of especially the Democrats, because, of course, they were able that way to relocate their industries into China and export goods back into the United States and not pay their workers American wages, but pay them Chinese wages instead. But the Chinese economy has now evolved beyond the point where it depends on exports. It is now an economy which also produces increasingly and largely for itself. As I saw when I was there back in 2017, it now has an enormous internal market. What it hasn't had, as I said, are the kind of natural resources that a continental economy like the United States does. But the Belt and Road policy will provide it. I mean, that's what it's for.
Can you say that maybe Trump's phone call to Putin, now that Russiagate is, well, for the sane people in the world, for the sane and normal people in the world, Russiagate is behind us. Yes. And can you say that maybe Trump, having very, very good political instinct, I mean, he has a good instinct. Say whatever you want about Trump.
Yeah.
He has very good instincts. Can you say that maybe his instinct is telling him, okay, we're about to get into, we are moving away from China at a geopolitical level. It's time, though, to start refocusing on Russia a little bit and not letting Russia go 100% into the Chinese camp. So let's get on the phone with Putin. Trump did mention we need to trade more. I mean, his instinct is speaking to him, saying, you know, we're about to duke it out with China. I can't have Russia, you know, fully on board as well with China.
Well, that's right, because let's now get onto the geopolitics. Can I first of all say that though I think an adjustment of the economies of the trade situation is inevitable, I don't think it was actually inevitable that China and the United States would become adversaries. I think that if the relationship had been managed properly, that might have been avoided. But it wasn't managed properly, and it wasn't managed properly long before Donald Trump appeared on the scene. I mean, already Barack Obama was talking about China becoming essentially an adversary. And though he allowed the economic imbalance to continue, he was already making the famous adjustment, the pivot to the east, in other words, the pivot towards containing China. Now, I think you're absolutely right about Russia. I think that Donald Trump has long said to himself, you know, we're now finding ourselves facing this massive challenge from the Chinese, who are this gigantic economy, in some respects now bigger than ours and growing faster than our own. And we need to find ways to contain this challenge. And we need to make up with the other great power, Russia, the other great military power, which is also the power that is able to provide China with all the natural resources that it needs. Because, of course, a China without those resources becomes much more vulnerable to economic pressure from the United States. That is a wise, or rather an intelligent, I know it's wise, an intelligent policy for an American geostrategist to adopt. And there are many people around in the United States who have spoken of it and have argued for it. Unfortunately, it isn't going, when I say unfortunately, whether unfortunately or not, it isn't going to happen because it is too late. It is too late for the Russians, because the Russians, having tried so hard for so long to develop a good relationship with the United States and with Europe, don't trust it anymore. And it is too late within the United States itself, because this Russophobia has taken such strong hold there that I just don't see Donald Trump being allowed to pursue this policy, even if the Russians were receptive to it, which I doubt they are.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, I really think that Trump's instincts are correct. And I
Yeah.
think the phone call with Putin showed that. But I
Yes.
think you're exactly right. I think they're so far down the rabbit hole with this Russia fear mongering
Yes.
and this fixation on Russia that they've missed
Yes.
the real challenge, which is China.
Absolutely. If Donald Trump had been president in 2008, if it had been Donald Trump elected instead of Barack Obama, and if he had pursued this policy of making up with Russia then, and had been allowed to do it, and had done it consistently and successfully, it's possible that in 2008, that might have achieved some results. But the Russians remember very well what happened when Obama became president. And Obama talked about a reset with the Russians, which, to be very clear, was partly also about playing the Russians off against the Chinese. And what the Russians discovered was that nothing that Obama promised ever really happened, and that he was meddling continuously in their internal affairs. And in the end, of course, he was the president who orchestrated the coup in Ukraine and who imposed sanctions upon them, and who also, against promises which he gave them, installed anti-ballistic missile interceptors in Eastern Europe. The Russians remember that, and they will never be fooled twice.
Yeah, and he started the war in Syria.
Exactly. All those things.
Yeah.
All those things. So the Russians remember that, and they say to themselves, look, Donald Trump may be a sincere man. He may be somebody who we would be able, if it was just him, to come to some sort of arrangements with. But everything that's happened over the last 30 years, since the Soviet Union fell, and even before, has taught us that the United States doesn't keep the promises it makes to us. And that whenever we make concessions to them, what happens is the US pockets those concessions and breaks the promises it makes in return for them. So that's the view that is now the prevailing one in Moscow. And I'm afraid nothing that Donald Trump can say is going to change it.
And so Trump has to go up, the United States and Trump have to go up against China and Xi, with a friendly Russia helping China with all their natural resource needs.
Absolutely. I will finish this. I will mention something that happened. And this I know did happen because a top minister in the Russian government, a man called Igor Shuvalov, disclosed it, which is that Joe Biden, remember him, went to the United States in 2011. It went to Russia, in 2011, at a time when Putin was prime minister and Medvedev was president. And there was talk that Putin might stand again as president. And he spoke to Putin and he said, the United States doesn't want you to stand as president of Russia. And Russia must understand that it cannot affect. It doesn't have the power to make a big impact on the United States. And Putin said to him, "We will make whatever decision we consider right as to who stands as president and not." And yes, Russia is not as as powerful a country as the United States is, but the United States must never forget that we can decide where the balance of power in the end will shift.
Well,
so that was what Putin said to Biden. We know he said it. It's been confirmed. And Biden and the United States paid no attention. And we are now where we are with the Chinese and the Russians, to all intents and purposes, allies, with Putin recently going back to China, meeting with Xi only last week, attending the Belt and Road there, committing himself further to deeper relations with China, with the Russians building pipelines to China, almost completed now, and with trade between China and Russia increasingly, or rather increasingly, being conducted in their own currencies and no longer in dollars. So that huge opportunity the United States had was lost, and Americans will be ruining the day years from now that it was lost.
Yeah, Biden and Obama were just too stupid to heed Putin's warnings. They played geopolitical checkers while
Yes.
Putin was trying to tell them, look, guys, we're playing chess here, and you guys are, you guys are moving pieces across the board.
Well, that's right.
Just terrible.
I mean, they moved all the little pieces,
Yeah.
and the Chinese and the Russians moved all the big ones. I mean, let's face it, the Russians are master chess players. And if you know the Chinese game of Go, the Chinese chess game, which is called Go, I mean, that's even more complicated than actual chess. I mean, Obama and Biden were simply not in that league.
Yeah,
And
Putin telegraphed it, though. I mean, he told them straight out.
Exactly. They were completely outplayed. And to be quite clear, I mean, I can't imagine any circumstance, actually, where Russia would have agreed to ally with the United States against China. I mean, maybe Yeltsin and the liberals in the 90s might have done that, though they didn't, by the way. I mean, Yeltsin pursued good relations with China. But certainly Putin would never have done that. But there was no, I mean, what could have been prevented was the de facto alliance between China and Russia, which we have now. And we could also have had a situation where the United States could have had good, or at least civil relations with both China and Russia, and would have been, still the key player in the triangle between the two. But all that was thrown away because of the incompetence. I don't think there's any other word.
An ego and narcissism.
The narcissism of U.S. diplomacy, especially in the Obama years, and the hysteria and fanaticism that we've had over the period of Russiagate. And as I said, eventually it will catch up with the United States, and people will rue it there. But there we are.
Yeah, people forget what a geopolitical foreign policy disaster Obama was.
Absolutely. I mean, let's be very clear about this. I mean, I have many criticisms of Donald Trump's foreign policy. As people know, I'm totally opposed to his policies in Venezuela. I disagree with many of the things that have happened in Syria. I don't agree with what's happened in Iran. But the real disaster, the complete mismanagement of geopolitics happened under the Obama administration. Donald Trump has a better grasp of geopolitics than Obama did, but he's not been able to see it through.
Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Guys, if you liked this video, click on the subscribe button down below. Click on that notifications bell to get notifications every time we push out a new video. Visit the Duran shop, buy a t-shirt, 20% off summer deals. Coupon code is in the description box down below. You can also donate to us on PayPal and Patreon. Those links are also in the description box as well. And you can get a copy of this video in audio format. Follow us on iTunes and on SoundCloud. You can also follow us on Instagram, the Duran_com, and download the Blank Chat app so you can get updates as to what's going on in the Duran daily updates. And visit our new site, theduran.com, to see all the articles that Alexander is linking up to every day. Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Thank you again. Until next time, everybody, take care.